Hey friend, Megan here. Today I'm going to share a little bit about my story. You might be joining me from a different chapter in my life, a friend that I've met along my journey, or you might have found me through the YouTube. And so either way, thank you for being here. But you might wonder who's this person sharing some tools and some comfy couch yoga and some mental health stuff. It's me. So my name is Megan, young me. Young me was actually my adoptive, my given name, which means beauty, prosperity, and eternity. And my my parents were actually going to name me Megan Elizabeth, and a neighbor found out that I had a given name. They found out what it meant, and they were like, "You have to let her keep that." And I'm so grateful for that person, whoever it is. So when I moved down to Peru, I dropped my name, and after I got married, I dropped my last name, and I go by Megan Young Me now. So my story, golly, I'm an adoptee, a Korean adoptee, adopted when I was almost 2, and I moved to a small little town in Pennsylvania called Lancaster, well, Lidditz, and it was just a little town, really, really cute actually, surrounded by a lot of agriculture and Amish people. In college, people used to call me Amish because I was a little bit naive because I went to college out in Los Angeles. So they used to call me Amish Megan because of my Lancaster County upbringing. But yeah, the adoption and abandonment story that comes with it has been a big part of who I am and the things that I've discovered through this process that I'll get into as we share little bits and snippets and stories. I definitely want to be creating more content for adoptees because I know that there's a lot underlying and hurting from losing a family and losing a culture. So, and gaining one. There's both positives and negatives to a lot of stories. And I think that through this channel, I'm going to be exploring both sides because I think sometimes we only focus on one, but I think it's really important to zoom out and see the bigger picture. Anyways, Asian adoptee. And I pretty much grew up as an overachiever in dance and school and pretty much everything I did. It was go, go, go from a really early age, which tends to be a lot about adoption and people pleasing and things like that. So I ended up going out to college in Los Angeles, and it was one of my favorite stories. Actually, I had a teacher, Mrs. Williams, who she really saw me, and that was one thing that I think was a pattern in my life, like not feeling seen. She really saw me, and she saw my interest in art and my interest in creativity, and she was like, Megan, you've got a really good GPA, like you don't have to go to a local school or a community college, because I really, at that point in my life, I didn't have a whole lot of self-worth and self-value, so I thought I was going to go to a community college locally, which is totally cool and would have been a good education too. But she's like, Megan, kids like you can get into any college they want. And I was like, yeah, but my dad he's a welder, and my mom she went through a couple different career changes, but we weren't well off by any means. We were very middle to middle, lower classes, whatever. But she ended up having me to apply to a bunch of schools in California. And she's like, I think people are really going to get you out there. I think you're really going to get it out there. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of people that kind of think out of the box. So I ended up getting into all the schools and had no idea how I was going to pay for it. And she just said, every day you're going to go and you're going to apply to scholarships. And so I did. And so I ended up getting my college funded. And so for me, a little small town girl ended up going to a really big city, and I really hadn't traveled much, and I really hadn't seen a whole lot of the world. And I got out there, and I was in shock. There was actually, I remember getting there and being like, these are the people that read Cosmopolitan magazine, because that was big back then. And I thought that was like a fantasy world, but it turns out people really do buy bags for like $1,000 and then they wear them to class at USC. So I had never thought about fashion, never thought about any of those things. And all of a sudden I'm in a school where people were wearing, $3,000 outfits to 8 o'clock in the morning class, feeling really like a fish out of water. So that was a pretty crazy transition in my life. And the dogs are going nuts as I'm talking about Los Angeles. And there's somebody outside, I think. So thanks for your patience through the video. Yes, I went out to school. I studied graphic design and marketing, and it started me on a career that I ended up working for Fortune 500s. I worked for tech startups. I worked in consulting. I ended up having about 400 clients across all industries. And one of the things I always say is really interesting about the marketing and design side is that I got to work with all departments. So many people in that corporate structure, they see only their job and only their facet. And I really feel like I got to see a much bigger range. I worked in banking and pharmaceuticals and entertainment and fashion, technology. And it was deeply, deeply eye-opening to see how things work from the inside. And I was kind of always a scrappy person that wanted to make a change from within. And then I started seeing these systems and seeing what they actually were. And I was part of funding for a lot of it, and like corporate communications. I was doing internal documents. I was doing marketing and like public campaigns for buying shoes. I saw the production and manufacturing for people stealing shoe designs, getting them to China, getting them to make them with cheaper toxic materials, paying people nothing, and shipping them back, and then putting small businesses out of business. I saw in pharmaceuticals that it was, it really wasn't about health, and the history of pharmaceuticals wasn't what I thought it was. I saw in banking, what the idea of money is, and this agreement that we make on what the value of money is really comes from debt. And so, oh gosh, I have so many stories about working in that industry. I worked for Oprah, I worked for Harvard, I worked for USC. So yeah, I was really kind of just so focused on my career. I don't know if there's a lot of people from the States, but in the States, and I do say the States, not America, because down here in South America, it's like when America claims that they're the America, North America, South America are all Americas. And so they're like North America from the States. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually true. So anyways, I'll refer to it as the States for people that are from the States. That's why. But yeah, I saw a lot, and I had climbed the ladder, and we're raised in a way in the States that's really focused on career and really focused on competition, and done from such an early age. I mean, you're like 3 years old, and you touch blocks and people be like, that's an engineer. You're playing with plants, like, you're going to study botany when you get to college. And so there's this push for your value and your identity being so focused on what you're going to do. And one of the first questions that people ask is, so what do you do for a living? Because it's such an identifier to then sort of bring up a value in people's minds, which I've learned living outside of the States now. That is not how other people live their lives and are kind of shuttled through what their identity, what their purpose is, what their value is based on their job, and why there's so much depression when people lose their jobs, and why there's so much lack of self-worth when people lose their jobs or careers or change careers, and why it's so hard for people to do that. So anyways, I kind of got to the point where I had seen so much corruption and misuse of funds. And during that time that I was working, I had been pretty much in abusive relationship after abusive relationship, because for me, I really didn't know that I had more value than that. And so it's been a really interesting journey to see how I had like thrown myself into my career and to be this good on paper person, And I really got to 30 and I realized I had no idea who I was or what I actually wanted. So when I hit about 26, 27, 28, they actually call it the Saturn Return, when Saturn returns into your planets. You kind of get a little bit of a, let's call it an ass kicking, that basically, oh, these doggies. I have 4 doggies now. It's part of my story. I love them. They're loud. They're outside during the day. Um, but we want to give them bigger space. I'll get to that later. Anyways, I had I had just started to do I had some mental health crises. I had some mental health crises during those years where I was really questioning so many things. Peru. There's a fruit truck that goes by. And it is so exciting because the boys don't know about ice cream trucks. They only know about fruit trucks, and it is the highlight of their day. And there's this amazing spread of fruit for really reasonable prices. So, okay, mental health crises. I had gone to jail after one abusive relationship that had gotten really physical on both sides. And I had a I had found out that I was pregnant and was not. I did not choose to keep the baby, which actually spurred me onto a lot of healing as an adoptee and someone that grew up with a Christian background, a fundamentalist Christian and actually Catholic early on background. So I really had a lot of issues around that and my healing and much of my self discovery was actually kicked off by that moment, and a moment that, I really have a lot of empathy for women and their bodies, and that they're life makers and what that responsibility is. But it really did kick me into a lot of going into therapy. And from there, I really uncovered some of the things from my childhood that I had pushed down to survive, which were sexual abuse. So during this time in my early 20s, I'm, good on paper, running through the corporate system, like becoming a creative director and in all these like high powered meetings and stuff. But my psyche was just absolutely breaking down. So yeah, I ended up in jail. I ended up in the mental hospital in my latter 20s because of a suicide attempt where I was legally dead. And so it was quite a journey to unpack adoption and abandonment and sexual abuse and just what happens to self-worth around that, what happens to anxiety, and the stories that we tell ourselves to keep going and to survive and to continue to try to function in the world. So that was my Saturn returns, and I ended up kind of getting to 30, and I was like, I can't find motivation anymore. I can't keep doing this and playing this game that I don't even know when I signed up for it or how I got into it. I was like, I think I need to take a break. I need to take a sabbatical. And I was dating a guy at the time in LA who was a senior producer for a very well-known reality TV show that traveled all the time. And I told him, I was like, I think I need to go travel. And, we were living in a condo on the beach. We lived right next to the marina. We had a boat. We went to ridiculous parties with a bunch of celebrities right next to the Playboy Mansion because he was really good friends with the son of one of the major networks. Blah, blah, blah. And I just kept seeing through this story and being like, I don't like it. And in the meantime, I was doing all this self-discovery and starting to learn about self-care and learn about some more like spiritual esoteric things that I was actually finding that had a deep alignment with science, because I've always been really into science, and I had some issues around religion and science and how to kind of merge these different belief systems around faith and beliefs and how things work. So that's another story. I'll get into those things at some point. But my boyfriend at the time would just kind of laugh at me. Like anytime I would say something like, I think the chakra system that's in all of these ancient cultures is actually completely aligned with the endocrine system. And I'm looking into it, and it's kind of exciting, and it all makes so much sense to me. And he would just laugh at me and call me a hippie and like write me off. And I just remember being like, I think this is the only time I'm showing you who I really am and what I'm truly interested in and passionate about. And you're taking it as a joke. And I realized that I had played roles. Like I put on masks for different people, and I had compartmentalized to be, perfect girlfriend and like perfect corporate worker. And I started realizing like how exhausting it was to play pretend, to try to be something that I wasn't. But at the same time, I had like no idea who I was. I realized I had never asked myself what I wanted. And it was a really hard question to ask. So I had this sort of synchronous chain of events that was like, go travel. And in the meantime, I was actually working with an acupuncture client, Megan Miller in Los Angeles, great acupuncturist if you're looking for one. And I had her as a client, and she gave me some exchange to do some acupuncture treatments. And so all of these things were kind of aligning and coalescing in a way that finally helped me leave my life. And I had never said I'm going to leave it forever. It was just a step that I really needed. And the acupuncturist friend told me, Megan, your diagnosis was that your heart wasn't talking to your gut and your will, and your will is all locked up. And I was like, I've never felt like I could follow through on things. Well, when I finally decided to leave LA, it was so easy because I had told this ex-boyfriend, I think I need to travel. I'm kind of going through a mental health crisis. I'm going to take a sabbatical. And he looked at me and he's like, that is so selfish. Well, at the time, I understand why, because he was trying to move into a more stable lifestyle, like for us as a couple. And I was kind of like, I think I need to like get out of here. So anyways, I looked at him and I was like, thank you. I think this is the only selfish thing I have ever done. I think this is the only thing that I've done for myself. And I started looking at that word, selfish. Like, why are we not allowed to think about ourselves? And why have we put ourselves aside so long? So I ended up packing up everything, selling everything, doing all the paperwork, and being done in a week. And during that time when I had left that guy, I had this other sort of social experiment when I was starting to dabble in this idea of like, where is our community? Like, where is our tribe? We've lost this connection to our neighbors and our friends. And I did this social experiment in my condo complex where I left my door open. And I would like say hi to people in the halls, or like offer to help people with their groceries or open the door or something. And people were like hungry for connection. And I started making all of these friends. And after living in LA for 12 years, where I just felt like people would just pass, they were all so busy. Everybody was so like, people would avert their eyes rather than say hello. And I thought that was kind of normal, and that's just how things were. And I was like, I'm going to just try to be open and see if this is something people are looking for. So I ended up making all of these friends in my condo complex. We were having like dinner parties and like cocktail hours. And we get together for watching movies and going down to the pool, because I live in a really nice condo complex. And my next door neighbor, who became a dear, dear friend and helped me a lot with finding the strength and finding playfulness again and exploration. Rebecca Lloyd, she's wonderful. She really helped me kind of like cultivate some of that. And when I left, I walked out the door, and she pops her head out and she's like, oh my gosh, did you guys break up? She's like, everybody's gone for the holidays. Come in. You're staying with me. So I got a free place to stay. I didn't have to go find a hotel or call up a friend in the middle of the night. She just popped out, and then we were doing like meditations together. And that's why I was able to sell everything so quickly and be done. So yeah, about a week later, December 21st, 2012, which looking back was a really important date, I left LA. And I had sold everything, so I didn't have to come back. And I just spent a week and a half driving across the country. And again, as soon as I made this step of faith, I just saw these synchronistic doors open. I had a place to stay every single night. I reconnected with all of these amazing people along the road. I had great food. We had dinner parties, and I just felt so welcomed and so taken care of and so supported when I was really freaked out about leaving everything. And I remember I was following the moon, and the moon was getting more and more full, and I returned back to Pennsylvania on a full moon, and I wrote a poem called Chasing the Moon, because it was just every night I would see the moon grow. So the first night I got back, I put up a thing on Facebook. Hey, I'm back in my little town. If anybody wants to come out to this little local pub, I'll be there. And a bunch of people came out. And then Eric came out. Eric is my husband. I hadn't seen him for 18 years, and we had known each other in middle school. We were in some classes together, and we were in the gifted program together. And he showed up in a full, like, lumberjack outfit, like 5 years of beard, wild Viking hair, and like steel toe boots, and just like kind of dirty looking. And he walks in, and he told me years later, he said, "Oh man, I'm gonna marry this girl." Well, I had no idea at the time, but there were tons of people there, and I ended up only talking to him, and all of a sudden the doors shut, and they were like, "You guys gotta go home." We closed down the bar, and I hadn't eaten my food or had a sip of my drink. We were talking for hours, and it was like this, there was this time vortex. So I reconnected him the first night I got back from Los Angeles, which was nuts. So basically, I will share this story of a little more in detail of the love story of Eric and I, because it is pretty weird and unexpected and kind of romantic and unpleasant at times. But that was the beginning of our friendship. And at that time I was like, you have to stay over there. I just broke up with my boyfriend of 2.5 years. We were ready to get married. We were ready to buy a house. And I left, and I have to let some dust settle and heal and figure out who I am before I jump into anything else. Because one of my patterns was to jump into relationships to kind of try to find myself or find a project or whatever. So I said, you have to stay over there. So we ended up just being friends, and I was home and was planning my trip to go travel for 6 months abroad. And I kept hearing Peru, and I had been down to Peru when I was 15 on a mission trip, and I was like, I never got to see Machu Picchu. And the way that I was in Peru at the time, I would rather do it without a belief system that I'm pushing on other people, because I was still working through my beliefs. And I was like, I kind of want to just go back and reconnect to it in a different way. So I picked Peru, and it was a pretty wild sabbatical. And during the time that Eric and I were hanging out, he had asked me, or he had told me, he's like, I really respect and get what you're doing. And I remember it was such sharp contrast to the ex-boyfriend who told me I was selfish. And he was like, you gotta go do it. You gotta go do it. And I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. I don't know what I'm looking for. I was like, I'm trying to figure out what home is, because I had never felt home in this tiny little town. I had never felt home in this big city, and I didn't really know who I was or what home was. So I kind of set that intention of looking for this idea of home. And I was kind of looking for a physical home, like where am I going to live next to? So went and traveled, and I ended up, again, just can't explain the synchronicities and magic that started opening up during that trip. Like, when you take a chance on yourself, when you step out into the unknown, it is the most terrifying thing ever. And every belief system and your entire ego and everything that you plan and hold on to gets brought to the surface in a way that is absolutely terrifying. But on the other side, there's this incredible magic that starts to open up when things start to just connect and flow, and the synchronicities and the joy in life started coming back, and my health started coming back. Because I had, oh gosh, when I had left, I had chronic back pain. I was on medications that were muscle relaxants. I had rheumatoid arthritis. I had severe acne. I was about 20-30 pounds heavier. I was losing my hair. And then when I was in South America, like, my health and my energy and my vibrancy came back. And I remember thinking, I never knew what it was like to feel healthy. I literally had no idea what it was to feel well. And I remember kind of crying and almost grieving and mourning that I had spent 30 years feeling sick. And then the second I felt healthy, I just had so much gratitude. And so also, Eric decided to come down for a bit of the trip. So that was a crazy, wild segue that I can get into another time. But it didn't work out well. We had a lot of expectations and we ended up kind of breaking up on Machu Picchu. Everything worked out. Don't worry, don't worry. But we had to go through that and kind of realize who we both were and work on ourselves a bit and kind of trust divine timing that things would work out. But it definitely wasn't what I thought. And that was a lot of this trip, was like, it's not what you think it is. Learning this, it doesn't have to happen the way or in the time that you think it has to happen, which was really exciting, profound, and hard to let go of, but really wonderful. So ended up in South America, Bolivia, Brazil, but I just kept getting pulled back to Peru during that time, during my sabbatical. And then I was trying to get back to the States, and all of the tickets were wildly expensive. And I remember just one night kind of looking at South Korea and being like, I think I'm just going to check out what prices are. I ended up getting a ticket from Brazil to the UK to South Korea and back to the States through the UK again, with like a week in between. It was the weirdest ticket ever, but I ended up getting to do that. And I spent a year, or not a year, that would have been crazy. I spent a month in South Korea kind of reconnecting to my heritage, my roots, and starting to do some self-discovery about adoption and ancestry. And I stayed in a Buddhist monastery for like 3 weeks of it. And I stayed in little towns. I had a little breakdown in the city because it was weird after being in all the nature. It was like really loud and a lot of plastic surgery and a lot of expectations and feeling lost and judged. So I got out to the little villages, which was really lovely. And then I came back to the States, and Eric and I just kind of picked up and maybe sort of started living together accidentally. It didn't happen intentionally. I just kind of kept hanging out there, and all of a sudden months passed, and he was like, "Are you living here?" I said, "I don't think so. No, we didn't make that decision." And I was like, "Oh, I think we did." So during those 3 months, which we call the summer of poverty and love, because I had spent my life savings on traveling and finding myself, and we had both drunk ayahuasca when we were down in Peru, and it was a really enlightening, profound experience to do together. And we really started to trust ourselves more and the universe more. But you also can't see the world in the same way after ayahuasca. So Eric actually couldn't keep working 90 hours a week, and he lost his job at the biggest rock star staging company in the world, and he ended up becoming a bartender and a sous chef. It was weird. It was a weird time. So we both had these weird hours and not a whole lot of responsibility, so we were just hanging out together. And then he ended up proposing to me 4 months after I had gotten back. And then during that time we were asking, what are we going to do with our life next? What do we see? And I had actually gotten job offers in New York and LA for another tech startup, working in Etsy product development, and they were VP level and creative director level positions. And I went and I interviewed, and I was spending time in both when I'd come home. And every time I thought about going back to that world, I would get physically ill. I was like, oh my gosh, 14-hour work weeks, doing it for what? Selling people things they don't need. I was like, I just don't know what to do. And I felt really grateful. And it was this moment in my career where I was like, this is everything I thought I wanted being handed to me. And I feel sick. So one night, Eric and I were just like, what does your heart say? He asked me point blank, what does your heart say, Megan? And I said, I have no idea other than I keep hearing Peru. He said, all right, let's get a ticket. And at that time, we were also really spending a lot of time researching and seeing how the world was working. And we are like, you know what? We want to go see what other lifestyle we can make. And he told me, he's like, you know, Megan, if you left for 6 months a year and you came back to jobs, this world is always there. Let's go down for 2 and see if we can build some sort of a life. And I was like, I can't say no to that. You've really presented it in a way that's super rational and also not completely overwhelming, because it is a completely overwhelming thing to think about moving to another country and leaving everything for real. That travel helped me get in the mindset that I could, because I realized I could work remotely. This was, 8-9 years ago, when that was not really a thing. I realized I could work remotely. I realized that any job can be done from, not any job, but a lot of jobs can be done from a computer. And I was still getting work, and we just got a ticket. Like, we looked it up, we found a $300 ticket, and we bought it, and we were like, oh my gosh, I think we're doing this. And then we had already gotten engaged, and he's like, well, do you think we should get married before we go traveling internationally without an end? And I was like, I think that's really smart. But during that time, we had gotten a job offer and a place to live and a really cheap ticket. And we were like, but they wanted us there in a month because we're crazy. So, yeah. So we got the ticket, and then we were like, oh yeah, we should get married. So we had 3 weeks to get married, and we did like a potluck barn marriage where, again, everything kind of worked out. It was really beautiful. We got to make everything. It was really non-traditional. My mom's a little freaked out, but it ended up working out beautifully. And then a week later, we were in Peru, like sold everything else that we had left and had 2 backpacks and just showed up in Peru, which is nuts. And I'm glad I had a partner for it, but I also had done a lot of the other travel without one. So it was good to know I could do it, but it was also good to know it was good to be supported. But we spent like 6 months in Cusco, and basically our relationship exploded, imploded. And we were like, we don't know each other that well. We don't know each other's triggers that well. We've only been like together for 4 months. We knew each other, but back in like 11th grade, it turns out he's got but he's on the autistic scale, and people use the word Asperger's, which is the easiest to kind of wrap your head around. And so my dad and my brother were on the scale as well, and I had a bunch of triggers from that. And when you actually make that jump and all of your fears come up, it was hard. I was gonna say horrible. It wasn't, moments, but we thought we were gonna destroy each other. and with all the this buildup of this idea of this new life, and then this sort of tumbling down of all of your expectations and ideas, and you're just in another country, it's raining all the time, it's cold, you don't know where anything is, you're in each other's space all the time, you don't have any other friends to go to. It was nuts. So we spent 6 months in Cusco, and we thought we were going to do a beer brewery because Eric brews really good beer, and ended up hanging out with a bunch of alcoholics and drank too much, and it got weird. So we hit this point where things weren't working, and we ended up at separating for 4 months, where he went out to the valley to do some self-reflection, healing work, and get away from me. And I was just in the city with Ted trying to get our paperwork done. It was an insane time in our life. But yeah, we ended up being in touch during that time, and both really doing a lot of introspection and a lot of, just like, how did we get here? What blocks we have? What expectations do we have to this relationship? And, what do we want to create? Like, are we running away from something? Or are we running to create something? And we had to dig deep. We had to really figure out what we were doing. And, this is as money is dwindling and you don't have a plan, and you kind of start to live moment by moment, but also, set some intentions and figure out what your passions are and all these things. So We ended up moving out to the valley. He called me and he's like, Megan, I had a dream about this house. I think we're supposed to live in this house. And I had never been to the house. And I was like, all right. Well, that night I started having dream after dream after dream of this house. And so we moved, and we ended up starting a guest home where we lived with 500 people from all over the world, from ages like 2 to 80. You learn so much about yourself when you share living and when you live with so many different kinds of people. It was a profoundly exciting time, and we were still working a lot out with ourselves in our relationship. And then we were planning to have kids. We were kind of at, like, I'm 38 now, and when this was all happening I was like 32. So we were definitely thinking about kids, but we also knew we wanted to work on ourselves a bit more. And then we found out we were pregnant while we had a guest home of 14 people living with us. So that was Alex, and we started our parenting journey in a guest home with witnesses. Like, there were people there at the home birth that were guests. Again, who are we? That was nuts. In some ways it was, in so many ways it was amazing, because like there was this one Iranian mama, Zora, who like, she had 2 kids, and she was like in her like, late 50s, early 60s, and she was just like, Megan, I'll hold the baby. You go take a shower and go sleep a little, and like, it's gonna be okay. And I was having postpartum depression, and I actually didn't have a home birth. I had a C-section, and so I was dealing with a whole bunch of recuperation and figuring out what that all meant. As my hormones were spiking, and I'm a new mom for the first time with all these people that need me for stuff, and trying to keep our Airbnb reviews going, and it was our lifestyle, so it was supporting us financially. And then we decided one day that we were done, and it was like a lot of different things that were kind of coming about. Our contract got changed, all this stuff. So anywho, we left the guest home business, and we really loved it, but it was mostly about saying, here are all of these travelers that need us 24/7 sometimes, and and here's our family, and we want to focus on our family. I don't want to have to pick between setting up Machu Picchu tickets last minute, or making sure somebody's getting from the hotel, or somebody's going through a crisis. I want to be there for my kids. I want to make sure that I'm there to be a mom. I had always wanted to be a mom. I thought I had lost the chance to be a mom when I left LA. I remember thinking, this is it. There's no way. And I know that's sort of silly in hindsight, but that is where my mind was. I thought, 30, by the time you start another relationship, by the time, it's just never going to happen. And so I felt so grateful to be a mom, and still do. It's awesome. It's really hard, but it's really awesome. So so we shut down the guest home. We moved into a little house. We had to figure out how to make money again, which is a whole other trick. I was really grateful for my old career, but I did it in a different way, where I could, pick my clients and decide to do it more in balance. And I was grateful for the skills that I had. So that's what we've been doing down here. Is I've been doing design, and we had a conversation as partners, like, here are the choices we made. Here's the lifestyle we wanted to build. If I'm going to be working for the financial part, are you willing to step up with the kids? And he did, and he was. And Eric is like one of the most talented human beings on the planet. He's like genius level brilliant, and has skills on he builds handmade recycled knives, and he made this beautiful cuff, and he's knows permaculture and eco building techniques. There's not much that he isn't capable of, but when it comes to the skills and time, we had to kind of, like, there isn't the same value in like custom built furniture here. So you're working 40 hours and somebody wants to pay 400 soles, which is $120. Whereas my job was, still working with Western clients, and and people having a sense and skill set. And I had a network of people and experience already running my own business. So it made a lot more sense to do it. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful he was able to step up to be super daddy. And he really, really is. He's so cool. But now that's our lifestyle. Is we have 3 kids now, 3 boys. We have a little like Andean adobe house with some yard space, and we're looking at another big move in the next year. I'll keep you kind of updated on that because I do think some of the channel stuff is going to be about that lifestyle stuff. But we are looking at some like high jungle cloud forest stuff for, doing the kinds of projects we love and being in nature and sharing skills and living in community because we really do love. We did, oh, by the way, when we had kids though, we still kind of kept renting rooms, and also because people would just show up after having the guest house. So we did have some rooms and some people, but we really loved it. Like we learned how amazing and valuable it was. And so we used to do rented rooms, and now we pretty much just do a volunteer room through like Workaway or through friends of friends or old visitors that had stayed with us before. And we do like 20 hours a week where they help out with like some gardening and some dishes and running and grabbing groceries, which is like amazing to be a mom and have somebody to just have extra hands and someone else to learn from. So we have continued living with people. So I can share a lot on community and living with people and how wonderful and hard it can be. There's a lot of movements and people wanting to, co-live or at least collaboratively share stuff. But there's a lot to go through before I think people can do it comfortably. It's a lot of vulnerability. It's a lot of honesty. It's a lot of boundary setting and communication. So I've got a lot of little tidbits and weird, fun experiences that I've had, and I'll be storytelling through this and, sharing what I learned and giving some tools if it's something that's helpful for you. But this ended up a whole lot longer than I was planning. I can do a snippet of 5 minutes to do the like big brush strokes, but I kind of got into details with you. So if you're still here, great. If you want to find out more about any of these weird, wild twists and turns of stories that we have, feel free to ask and comment below. I'm happy to do like an ask me anything. But that is where we're at. Mom of 3 in the Andes, doing some freelancing, working on a lot of community projects here since I do have a lot more time than most people. We don't watch TV and we're not really crazy on the social media or screens. At least we try to do it in balance. And so we have a lot of time to be able to give back and work with projects that we think are really cool and really meaningful. So we work with organic vegetables and natural birth and orphanages, because those are things that are really important to us. Caring for each other and caring for the earth. Those are kind of our 2 main things. And then with that, caring for ourselves. So that is that. Ask me if you have questions. Thanks for listening and sticking around. And I love you. Love from Peru. And I'll talk to you soon.